Hi, I'm Kit Bowen.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and this is the Creation Entertainment Podcast, Episode 3.
Episode 3. What's on the plate?
Well, Adam Malin interviews writer-creator Stephen Moffat. You know him from Sherlock and, of course, Doctor Who. Kit calls him Doctor Whom, but it's Doctor Who. And part one of this interview really covers his early years leading up to the time where he showran for Doctor Who.
And on this week's Pop Culture Cinema Squad, we're going to take a deep dive into the Apple TV Plus series Silo, from creator Graham Yost, who also did Justify, Masters of the Air, and much more. It's a great show.
And then, in our Creation Looks Back segment, Adam and Gary look back at the early years of creation and Star Trek legends Majel and Majel Roddenberry, two people that are very near and dear to my heart. They don't know who I am. They never did. But I know who they are, and you know who they are. You've got to see this.
So enjoy the show, and stay tuned as Ryan and I give you the skinning on some new stuff coming up with Creation.
Stephen Moffat, the prolific writer and showrunner of British fame, has given us many wonderful television shows, not the least of which are Doctor Who, Sherlock, and the Dracula miniseries. In my conversation with Stephen, we had a chance to touch upon his entire career, his wonderful early shows for British television, and of course, moving on to work both with Russell Davies as showrunner, and then himself as showrunner on Doctor Who, and then in his incredible collaboration with Mark Gatiss on Sherlock, and then the Dracula miniseries for Netflix. We had a great conversation with Stephen, which I hope you'll enjoy right now.
Ooh, hello there, how are you?
Adam Malin, so nice to meet you.
And you, Matt, and you.
Very, very kind of you to give us some time, and it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm a big fan. If we may, we'll just dive right into it.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Stephen Moffat, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. And your American fans know you best from Sherlock and Doctor Who, but you're a bit of a household word in England, where you kind of cut your teeth on a couple of shows that may not be that well known to our American audiences. If you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about those, starting with Press Gang.
Yeah.
For our viewers here that aren't familiar with it, Press Gang is a show that you did from 1989 to 1993, and you actually won a BAFTA award for it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Basically concerns a Fleet Street journalist who comes to do a local newspaper with school kids. And it's a great setup. And to quote the British Film Institute, Press Gang managed to be perhaps the funniest children's series ever made, and at the same time, the most painfully raw and emotionally honest. The tone could change effortlessly and sensitively from farce to tragedy in the space of an episode. Those are great words of praise. The first thing I wanted to ask you about was how you came up with the premise. I mean, I guess some people know that you were a teacher yourself, but where'd you get the inspiration for the premise of Press Gang?
Well, first of all, thank you for that review. I've never read that one. That's great. That's a lovely one. And the answer, perhaps surprisingly, is I got the premise from my dad. It was, in fact, God, this is quite a convoluted story, but here it is. My dad knew that I wanted to be a writer. I specifically wanted to be a terribly serious playwright, so that's going well. And his school was being featured on a religious television program called Highway. And he said to the producer of that, "I've got a great idea for a kids' TV show," which he didn't really have. What he had was an education kit built around a kids' newspaper. But he passed it off as a TV show, and the producer said, yeah, fair enough. Okay, and backed away. as you do when someone says, I've got a great idea for a TV show. And then 2 years later, my dad was approached by the producer's girlfriend, an American, who said, I'd love to develop your idea for a kids' TV show, but I can't give you any money. You know, like all Americans always say that, don't they? He said, well, fine, you can have the idea and you can develop it, but I want my son to write it. And she said, absolutely not, under any circumstances can your son write it. But what I will do is I will read his pilot script for it and tell him what's wrong with it and then get a proper writer. But as luck would have it, she absolutely loved the script I wrote. So I ended up not being a serious playwright. I ended up writing a funny series for kids called Prescott.
Which is awesome. And what is it like, writing parts for kids as opposed to adults? I mean, that has its own kind of set of you have to have a certain skill set for writing for kids, right?
Well, in a way, I mean, the kids in the show were teenagers. They were like 16, 17 in
That's
theory, by 18, 19.
Yeah,
And I was at the time when I started writing that, I think about 24. So it wasn't a great effort of memory when I started. It got progressively harder, but they were teenagers, and I remembered being a teenager well enough. I mean, in your mid-20s, you still are pretty much a teenager, aren't you? So that wasn't so bad. I'm not sure I'd be so great at it now, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'm sure you would be. At this point in your career, what was your interest level in terms of how you were presenting the narrative? Because your way of taking narratives and spinning them in 100 different directions is part of your notoriety and part of what I love so much about you. Was the narrative that on this show fairly straightforward, or did you begin to introduce some of those Moffatisms that you do, where you kind of jigger and play with narratives and reverse?
Oh, there's a ton of that. There's a ton of that in Press Gang. There's time splits. There's telling the story backwards. There's everything that you're pleased to call a Moffatism in there, because obviously I had a whole TV show to play with. So I was just trying out every narrative trick I could think of. And it seemed like it seemed to me like a time when television was doing quite a lot of that. And I mean, do you remember the old show Moonlighting?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, what a wonderful show. I've just been watching some of it again recently. What a wonderful show. And the looseness and the fun and the playfulness of that show amazed me. And I thought, God, you're allowed to do anything. You don't have to play it with a straight bat. You can do anything. Especially when, the fact is, our audience is narratively literate. They get no problem keeping up with telling the story in the wrong order or backwards or in a split screen or any crazy damn thing like that. They love it. They absolutely love it. So
are you suggesting that I'm illiterate? Because I do sometimes have some problems following some of the narrative twists and turns that you offer.
Well, I'm sorry about that. That's probably because I wasn't doing them very well.
No, that's not true. That's not true. You seem to take a tremendous interest in developing complex narratives, and that's what makes great storytelling. Is we want to have something that just doesn't deliver to us immediately. We want to be able to work a little bit to understand how it develops.
It depends what you mean by not follow. I mean, it's supposed to sort of bamboozle you at the start and draw you in to try and find out what goes on. Hopefully, you get to the end, it all ties up in a neat bow. Yeah. Some people seem to be very impatient with not knowing everything that's happening right now and that's going to happen in the next half an hour. I don't like that kind of storytelling. I think I think you need to be led through the mystery, thrown into the maze. That's much more fun.
I agree. The American tastes are somewhat possibly dumbed down, so I'm not sure that they do have the patience for some of your machinations, but I certainly do. And I take
well, look at Moonlighting. Moonlighting was incredibly radical in a very mainstream space.
Right.
Breaking the fourth wall, going into black and white, suddenly doing it in blank verse. I think Americans are just fine with all that.
I think we are. I wanted to talk a little bit about coupling, which was sort of your answer to Friends. I mean, you came out with the series. It was in from 2000 to 2004, BBC show, and it's the sort of dating and sexual
Mm,
and kind of misadventures of six friends, three guys and three ladies,
mm.
but with a very interesting narrative device in which each of them are looking at the same set of events from their own points of view. Could you talk a little bit about coupling?
We never particularly thought of it as a response to Friends, to be honest. It kind of looks the same in the poster, but it was really about a couple and the split perspectives between them. We never really thought of it that way. Because it was really in a vague, refracted sort of way, the story of me and my wife getting together. People used to ask us, me and my wife Sue, people used to ask us, we both worked on the show, obviously, which characters are based on you? And I'd say very patiently, the character's called Steve and Susan. Who do you think? So it was kind of, to some degree, our story. And again, my enthusiasm for messing about the narrative is just something that motivates me. I like it. I like it when it's done to me. If you tell me a story is scrambled up in the wrong order with flashbacks and half of it's upside down, I'll go watch it. I think it's great fun. I love all that.
I do too, and I think it starts with a love of the language. It's
Mm.
that, that's it all starts with the word, it all starts on the page. And to that effect, I wanted to kind of just sort of get some of your insights in terms about storytelling, a few different aspects of storytelling, because I think of you as a master storyteller. So first, kind of give me your reflection on how you develop character arcs, because your character arcs are incredible.
Um,
How do
well,
you
that's,
get
I
from
mean,
point A to point B to point C? Do you sort of have a conscious methodology for building a character arc?
not precisely. I think character arcs, when they're good, which isn't always the case, not always the case in my work either. But when they're good, they emerge. They emerge from the story. You start to realize what you're writing as you write it. Because from week to week, from episode to episode, what you're doing is telling a story about characters and what they do. You're focused, and this is the main thing I think about storytelling. Above all else, you are focused on getting the audience's attention, rewarding their attention, and getting more of their attention. That's what you're doing all the time. You know, uh, it's every kind of cliffhanger at once is writing television. You can't afford to let those people out the room or
Yeah.
switch channel or pick up their book or go on go onto onto Twitter or some damn thing. You've got to keep their attention. Now, one of the things in which we are most interested are the people. So if there is a cliffhanger built into someone's personality, into someone's actual life, and you want to know what they do next or what happens to them next, that's your character arc. That's it right there. Once you become invested in someone you know is entirely fictional, you've got a tremendous pull through the story. It works tremendously well if you've got a character who's going to change, to whom things are going to happen, and crucially, you always want to know how that character will react in a given situation and what they'll say and what they'll do.
So you're saying that it's not like you sit there and develop character A, character B, character C, and then build the story around them. The story's organic growth is what itself grows the arc of the character. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, week by week it is. I mean, you obviously start with your characters. I mean, if you're talking a weekly television show, you haven't written it all at once. So when you're writing episode one, you don't necessarily know everything about episode 12, right? You've got you find things out as you go. Characters tend to, in my experience, start as rather simplistic creatures, just sort of impulses. They're sort of just ideas, just simple ideas, and As you write them more, they become more and more complicated. And that starts to motivate the story. At the beginning of a TV show, you're not invested in those fictional characters. You don't care about them. You just want to see if some cool stuff happens, and then you'll watch. But as the show goes on, you do get invested in them, and as a writer, you can start playing that a different way. But not at the very beginning. You watch the first episode of Cheers, you don't care about Sam Malone yet. You'll learn to, but you don't care about him yet. So yeah, you start with a story, and the further and the more that story grows, the more it becomes driven by and woven around the characters.
And then just extrapolating from that, one of the things about your storytelling that I love so much is that there's always a strong emotional payoff that really kind of gets my heart attached to the story. I find that you're able to, even in episodic and serial things like Doctor Who, Sherlock, that you're able to get an emotional payoff in every episode. So how do you do that? How do you kind of craft the heart into that in such a way that by the end of the episode, I'm very emotionally invested into what's happening?
Well, I mean, it's more like well, you're going to have to do that. You have to do that. It's just a made up story. So unless and people know it's just made up and these actors are all just pretending. So you kind of have to get people to emotionally invest. How do you do it? I mean, it's not in certain respects that complicated. A second of television or a minute of television that isn't making you feel something is wasted. If it's not making you feel something, if it's amused or curious or angry or tearful or frightened or any of those things, a second that is not doing one of those things is a second you should cut in the cutting. You should get rid of it. So you're always trying to do that. As to how you do it, well, there's a million different ways. But you know, if you sit and stare out the window, and I always define comedy writing as this: sit and stare out the window until you can make yourself laugh. And once you've made yourself laugh, write it down. Now that applies to everything, to every piece of to every kind of emotional reaction you might be searching for. Stare out the window till you make yourself cry with an idea, or make yourself frightened with an idea. Don't write it down until until it's made you feel something. Because if it doesn't make you feel something, it has got no chance of making anybody else feel something. So it's not about 3-act structure. It's not about good spelling. It's not about how you format the script. It's about what are the audience feeling line by line in this show. And if there is a piece of your show where they're not feeling anything at all, throw it away. That's the best I've got for that.
It's great. It works because I get very emotionally attached to the stories that you create. And I'm sort of interested, since we're talking about the writing and you work with the team. I mean, it's a collaborative thing. You came on Doctor Who in, I think it was 2005. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Working with Russell. Of course, I want to
Yeah.
talk with you about your relationship with some of these other incredible guys like Mark and Russell. But when you first came on to Doctor Who, Russell was the showrunner. Did I get that right?
That's correct, yes.
Can you describe the structure of the writer's room and kind of how did it all work in terms of the long story and the episodic story? How does that whole system of the writer's room work? It's a hierarchy.
Right. Well, this is today's most disappointing answer. There wasn't a writer's room. It never happened. What happened on Doctor Who, which is quite an episodic show, is that Russell would choose his writers. Later on, I'd be doing this job. He would choose his writers and say, "Could you do one set in the Second World War about a spooky child?" I'd say, "Okay, I'll go and do that." And sometimes he'd say, "Oh, I need you to put a little bit in about this character. Oh, and could you mention this?" And I'd say, "All right, fair enough, I'll do that. I've no idea why you're asking me to do it, but I'll do it." So Doctor Who, as far as I know, throughout my time, throughout Russell's time, and Russell's back doing it again now, and I think
Yeah.
Chris's time, when no writers' room. Okay, the only time the writers met each other would be if we all decided to go for a drink. So Russell was the mastermind, and the rest of us were just were getting our assignments and going off and doing that. I think in the case of Doctor Who, it's a very particular kind of show. You want every episode to be in a way as different as possible. You don't want them to be homogenized. You don't want them to feel as though it's the same voice every week. You want them to be different. You know, the Doctor lands on a different planet, runs out, meets some different aliens, and it's different this week because it's a different writer and a different director and a different guest cast and a different designer. You know, that's those things are critical. Actually, it's not usually a different designer. I'm making that up. But you know, it's different. It's fresh and different every time. So no writer's room. I can tell you almost nothing about writer's rooms.
Well, first of all, I think you're right that, well, that's a revelation and it's fascinating, but the episodes do feel almost like anthologies. Each episode really does, although there is some kind of
Yeah.
through thread and spine. They very much are standalones, almost like an anthology of different stories.
Yes, they are.
Thread. So I get that, but I am fascinated by the fact that what you're saying is that the showrunner essentially is the long story dictator for the whole season.
I
Um,
wish I thought of that term when I was doing the job. Long story dictator would have been a great term, a great
um,
sign from my office door.
listen,
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, well, I've encountered that both as an episode writer and as the long story dictator. To be
yeah,
honest, when you're in writing your episode, you're not that bothered about the long story. You know, you're sort of saying, I'll just be saying, okay, Russell, what do you want? And he'll say, "Oh, could you have a scene where it's obvious that something sad is going to happen to Donna in the future?" That's what he said to me in Silence in the Library when I wrote that one, and it was
right.
heading towards Donna, Catherine Tate's departure, and he said, "I want River Song to say something that suggests that Donna has a sad ending." And I said, "Don't tell me what the ending is. I'll just watch it, but I'll put that scene in." So that was how it worked. Yeah, very much so.
Uh, so then around, I'm going to say it was about 2010 when you came on and took over being the
Yeah,
showrunner
yeah.
for Russell, and you two seem every 5 to 7 years, you two seem to switch off. So I'm thinking that in a few years, Russell will hand it back to you again.
No, he
Uh,
will not.
but
No, he will not.
okay,
I'd rather stay
as
married. No.
as a as a showrunner, and as a writer, what do you look upon yourself as your relationship with the director of an episode, who is so important to the crafting of an episode? How do you look at that relationship, and how involved do you get with the director?
Very involved, and I've got on exceptionally well with all the directors who came on to Doctor Who, whether as writer or as showrunner. Directors are tremendously important to Doctor Who, tremendously important, and in a way not talked about enough because they have to create a new feel and a new look and a new idea of presenting the story every single time on Doctor Who. If you do an episode of something utterly brilliant like, I don't know, The West Wing, it always looks the same. Brilliant. I absolutely love it, but it always looks the same. Doctor Who has to be different all the time. So the directors are asked to be more authorial than normal. We're saying, come on, make it. I used to say, when I was dealing with directors as showrunner, I'd say, I want you to make the movie you imagined you wanted to make when you were 8 years old. I want no subtlety. I want that camera to never stop moving except to make a point. I want you to watch every Spielberg there is and cram it into your brain. Just give me that. When I was doing Sherlock, I used to say, this is the movie you wanted to make when you were a moody adolescent. But on Doctor Who, it was when you were 8 and just wanted whiz-bangery and explosions and robots. Wanted it so exciting. But no, I got on well, really well with all the directors. Writers and directors should always be friends because we are the two ends of the same process. And I'm still friends with most of them, so a very good
I mean,
relationship.
That's good because I always thought that directors were such strong creatives that I want to hope that, you know, the person that writes the story can work well with the director, because I feel like they're the core partnership in making an episode.
It's a core partnership, and it's well, and with the producer. The producer is incredibly important, and again, not talked about enough. And I'll tell you, on Doctor Who, the designer, massively important in Doctor Who. Everything you see has to be built or found, and the designer's in charge of that. And Murray Gold, the brilliant composer, all those things are massive, massive parts of Doctor Who. And if you don't get them all correct, the design, the music, the casting, everything, if you don't get them all right, it doesn't work. Every single one of them has to work, or the show's a dud, and that does happen, I'm afraid.
I agree. In the modern era of Doctor Who, which I sort of think begins kind of with Russell in
It does,
2005
yeah.
and through
Mm.
you, is an incredible looking show. And you allude
Yes.
to production design and environments. I wanted to just talk a little bit about, well, Doctor Who is such a wonderfully British show.
Mm.
I, you know, Americans with a love of the word and a love of writing, we do look at England and the English writing tradition as so special, and also very idiosyncratic. And the Doctor Who feels so British to me.
Mm.
Although I should maybe mention Scottish as well, because I notice a subversive reference to the Scots all the time on the show, at least where you're involved.
Well, I am Scottish, so that's why. But yes.
Um, but I love some of the historical worlds and references that the show brings in
Mm.
and creates. I just want to just mention a few of them, sort of stream of consciousness, and have you comment about them. Um, Winston Churchill, World War II. I I love that. That's embedded in the British consciousness, right? That trauma from
Yes.
World War II. Now, were you were your parents obviously lived through that? And
Yeah, they were very young. They were very young. That's a long time ago now. But I don't suppose Winston Churchill has ever disappeared from the national consciousness. And he has a case for being one of the greatest war leaders anywhere in the world. I mean, an extraordinary man. Do you know he wrote more? I'm told this. He wrote more than Dickens and Shakespeare combined,
wow,
and he ran the country during World War II. I mean, how's that for a career? An
well,
extraordinary, powerful, and sometimes dangerous man. But because he's so iconically British, I mean, he might be the most Britisher there's ever been. Putting him with the Daleks, that was, I just wanted to do that. I mean, I got Mark Gatiss in to write it because he knows his Churchill really well. And I originally said, it's Churchill of the Daleks. Just give me that. I want to see Winston Churchill with his cigar talking to a Dalek. That's the
well,
most British thing I can imagine.
I mean, when the Dalek showed up, and the Dalek was ostensibly working for the British military, you
Yeah,
knew that was going to unravel. That
that's
wasn't
going
going
to
to
be
happen.
bad.
Uh,
Yeah.
but uh, but I love seeing Winston Churchill recreated, and the words that you guys put into his mouth, and the World War II Blitz, which you bring back in Empty Child and the Doctor Dances.
Mm,
That whole period is so incredible. Another period that you touched on a couple of times was well, in Vincent van Gogh's life,
mm,
getting into that period, and then you managed to weave Vincent's painting uh, into the girl on the fireplace, which I thought was fascinating. We'll get to that in a minute,
mm.
but creating France in 1890 or 1880, wherever it was, this drawing back to different historical settings gives the show, I think, a very
Well,
provincial European flavor.
well, I mean that's not a stretch for us because We are British, we are European. That's just how it comes out when we make it. Um, and he's a time traveler, and so we have the option of being a costume drama whenever we feel like it. And if Doctor Who goes back in time, we want Doctor Who to meet famous people, like Vincent van Gogh and Churchill and all those people.
Yeah, no,
Matt Pompadour, yeah.
we love that. Tell me about the genesis of Captain Jack Harkness. Such a fascinating character.
Well, I can't really tell you very much because he's not my character. I introduced him to the show, but that was one of the elements that Russell wanted me to introduce.
Ah,
So he gave me a brief for what Captain Jack what would be like, and I was the first person to write him. I think my major contribution was giving him a vortex manipulator on his wrist. I think that's about it. So, but it was Russell's idea, and obviously the character developed hugely after I'd finished my one go of writing him.
can we talk a little bit about the episode "The Girl in the Fireplace"? This is one of my favorite episodes of yours.
Mm,
Just to kind of refresh people's memories, it, it kind of involves a setup in the future where there's a ship with these repair droids who are cannibalizing the crew,
mm,
and the biological crew members, they're cannibalizing them to fix the ship, and they need a brain. And for whatever their reasons, they decide that this lady, Madame de Pompadour, who is a lover of Louis XV, they want her brain. And it becomes a very elaborate uh, and very emotional time travel story. Can you give me some thoughts about the episode, how you constructed it, and where your inspiration was for it? It's historical, it's futuristic, it's a wonderful pastiche of a lot of things happening at the same time.
Well, first of all, it came from, again, Russell said, could you do a story about Madame de Pompadour, who was a real person, as you know? So I read the book about her, and I was trying to think what to do with her. And I thought, well, oddly enough, she was not, although she was the king's mistress, she was rather uninterested in sex. She was very intellectual and very, very clever. And I thought, well, that sounds a bit like Doctor Who himself. So maybe they could have a fling. Thought that would be quite fun if Doctor Who has a little romance with Madame de Pompadour. So I went that way. Also, very significantly for me, is I just read The Time Traveler's Wife, and I'd said to Russell, "Oh, we've got to do something like that on Doctor Who. We've got to do a proper story of love and longing on Doctor Who. That would be great." So I very consciously took many leaves out of Audrey Niffenegger's book, and to my great joy, Audrey saw Girl in the Fireplace, recognized that I was, shall we say, paying tribute to her, and in her next novel had a character watching the Girl in the Fireplace on television.
Oh
And
my
I thought,
goodness.
she's
Wow.
on to me. She's on to me.
I find that you're able to, uh, by pulling together stories in different time periods, there's an emotional payoff that
Mm,
comes, that's the payoff is magnified by the fact that it's happened through different times and that have all led up to one conclusion. Uh,
mm,
that's an amazing uh, narrative device. I mean,
mm.
I'm not sure how it's just an instinctive thing for you, but the way that you are sort of able to weave different time periods to have a big emotional payoff at one point.
It's just it just comes that's the way I think of it. I mean, if you've got a main character who is a time traveler, and not only is he a time traveler, he doesn't just own a time machine, he lives in one. He lives in a time machine. So the whole universe is still happening to him. Everyone's dead and everyone's alive at the same time. Anywhere and anyone can be outside his blue doors anytime he wants. So it seemed to me natural to weave that into the fabric of the show. That time travel element, those different eras. Because if you lived in a time machine, that's what you'd do. You'd be running out those doors into every possible event, anywhen, anywhere.
So time really isn't, in the case of a time traveler like Doctor Who, it's not really linear. It's
Mm.
more vertical with all times past and present all at the same time. And that kind of leads me into the Pandorica Opens, which I wanted to talk a little bit about. But first, how did it come that you then became the showrunner in 2010? How did that all come about?
Um, well, it was Russell told me fairly early on that he was doing 4 seasons and then he was leaving. He then amended that to 4 seasons and a few specials, and everyone kept me very up to date on what was happening. I didn't quite realize why until basically they offered me the job. I mean, I had sort of vaguely thought I might be someone who might be doing that job someday because, well, I mean, I don't know how to put this without sounding immodest, but my stories had gone down well, and I was the only writer who came back every year apart from Russell himself. So I figured that I was it might be me, but it still came as a tremendous shock when they asked me, and I had to think incredibly hard about it. It took me several months to say yes, because I was aware from Russell just how demanding a job it was. And again, my dad's involved in this because he phoned me up one day, a couple of months after I'd been offered the job, but still hadn't accepted it. And he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I don't. It's weird, but they've just offered me Russell's job on Doctor Who, and I don't know what to say." And he said, "You are obviously going to do it. You've loved this show all your life." And he sent me a photograph of me at the age of, I don't know, 10 or something, reading a Doctor Who book. And I thought, yeah, obviously, I've always been going to do this job. But it's a thing. It's a massively demanding job. It drives a truck through your family life. You never have a weekend off. You miss dinners all the time. You're working every holiday. It was one hell of a ride for those 7, 8 years. So I was nervous of taking it on. But looking back on it many years later, I'm very glad that I did.
Welcome back on our exclusive coverage of the conclusion of the second season of the Apple TV series Silo. Kit, that's a heck of a show.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's funny because I started watching the first season, and I'm going to be drawn to anything like that, right? Especially from Apple TV Plus, which has some amazing programming. And I'm like, this sounds familiar to me.
Well,
I'm like, oh, I've read the books.
And after all, Kit, you are a survivalist. You do have a bunker underneath your house, so
I do. It goes way deep. I only have 2 levels right now, so I don't have 144 levels.
All right.
Just 2 levels.
Why don't you set up the show for our viewers?
So,
please? Yeah.
basically, it is we are now at season 2 for this, and it is based on a series of short novels, actually, by Hugh Howey. The novels are called Wool, Shift, and Dust. So I think the first 2 seasons pretty much take care of wool, and there's like little sections to it. But it takes place in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic Earth, where there are about 10,000 people who live in a silo, which is like, I don't know, 18,000 feet down or
Now,
something.
warning,
like
there are going to be spoilers here.
Yes.
So if you don't want to hear not only what's going on as of the end of season 2, but kind of looking ahead
Yes.
to what the book continuity is, then beware.
Yes. So, this silo is a sort of self-contained community, or a self-contained, what would you say?
Ecosystem,
Society.
yeah.
Ecosystem,
I mean, they've
yeah.
got their own farms,
Yes.
they've got their own water, they've got
Right.
their own heat.
It's a caste system as well. So the higher up you go, the more you're sort of important in the upper echelon.
Yeah, why is it that the important people are always up on the top and then the scum of the earth are always down on the
I
bottom?
don't know. I don't know. But a little background to getting this made.
Yeah.
Hugh Howey, when he first published the books, he self-published actually.
Oh, wow.
First, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he signed a deal with a publishing house, but it was going to be a feature film with Ridley Scott producing with 20th Century Fox.
Wow.
But then it kind of fell through, and finally Graham Yost, he's a big TV producer, he's
And
done
showrunner,
the Americans, Masters
Super
of
talent.
the Air,
Yeah.
and Justified, which I never saw, but I heard it was really good. Anyway, he took the reins and did the first 2 seasons of this. So it's kind of interesting how the evolution of it became. But yeah, I think it works better as a series than it would as a movie, I think. So it's got a great cast. It's got Rebecca Ferguson, who I love her from the Mission Impossible movies. I just love her.
She's awesome.
Tim Robbins, he's one of the main characters as well. Harriet Walter from, famous British actress. She's done like a million things. Ava Nash, Rick Gomez, and there were some reoccurring people or people who actually came and then left, like David Aiello. Common's also in it. So it's got a great cast. I love it. I think the first season, I think we both agreed, but the first season was a little bit more.
It ran a little slow, and it's pretty well much a box story.
Right.
Basically, the premise that got set up is that we sort of found this society living inside of a silo, an underground system that was 144 levels, with a big spiral concrete staircase that goes all the way up and all the way down. And as you alluded to, a caste system, engineers, administrators, judicial, and
very good. Nicely put.
The premise is that you can't go outside because it's a wasteland out there.
Right.
And however, if you buck the system, or if you are kind of like the squeaky wheel, they will send you out to be a cleaner, which means you go out there to clean the video portal with which you look out upon the apocalyptic wasteland. And they send people out there
either willingly or not.
And they go out there, and almost as soon as they go out there, even though they're in supposedly these environmental hazard suits, they just drop dead. The mystery starts to deepen when all of a sudden we see this image of the outside flicker. And so all of a sudden we see like a beautiful, pastoral, fertile earth out there instead of the blighted wasteland that we see on the big video screens in the cafeteria. And Rebecca Ferguson, her character Juliet Nichols, becomes sort of like the point of the spear of people that question what's going on out there. It's all a big lie. She wants to get to the truth. And of course, then becomes an antagonist to the establishment led by Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins, yeah.
So at the end of the first season, if you recall, she finally is forced to be a cleaner herself.
Right.
But what nobody that went out previously knew was that the reason why their suits were failing was because of bad duct tape. Kit, I'm telling you, you've got to use a good brand of duct tape or you're screwed, okay? I keep telling you not to buy these inferior brands of duct tape.
I know, and I don't listen.
But I guess there was a special engineering tape that she used.
Because she wasn't mechanical.
Yeah, and this girl can fix, a lot of stuff.
Right, yeah, she's like a whiz at it.
Oh, and by the way, she also had a friend that alluded to some of the weird stuff that was going on at the very bottom of the silo, alluded to a tunnel, there's water down there, and he ended up dying with his secrets.
Yes.
But at the end of season 1, she goes out of the portal and she lives.
Yeah, she makes it past the point, like over a hill kind of thing.
But this is the part that confused me, and you figured it out and explained it to me, because she was seeing the pastoral world out there, right?
No,
she was.
Well, actually, no. What they do,
it
is
inside
definitely an apocalyptic world out there, and it is not safe for
But
humans.
when she first went out there, she was seeing.
But that was done by IT. So the Tim Robbinson's
this pastoral world that she saw
Right.
is just projected inside of her viewing
Correct.
plate.
So to make the people who are out there cleaning think they actually are in a lovely world kind of thing, but they actually in reality are not.
Yeah, maybe maybe that just gets them to take off their helmets, so they'll be dead.
Basically, yeah.
But for whatever reason, she does survive enough to kind of get outside of the sort of area of the silo, and yes, it's kind of like an apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah. And she makes it to another silo, Silo 17. So they live in Silo 18, and she makes it to Silo 17, which had a rebellion, and there is no one left alive except for one person.
Right. Well, she gets to the silo, and she does make it inside.
Now we're at season 2.
And in season 2, we kind of discover, as you say, the loss of the entire society that was in that other silo. But we do meet the amazing Steve Zahn, who plays Solo. You want to talk a little about the Solo character?
Well, he is supposedly the only living survivor of some kind of horrible rebellion that happened in this silo, and he is holed up in what they call the vault.
And he was supposedly entrusted to the vault.
He was entrusted to the vault, so he lives in the vault. And now we get to see what the vault actually is in season 2. Basically, it's sort of a library of museum of all things that came from Earth, basically.
But isn't it also one of the IT cores of the facility? Because we do discover that there is, what else? An AI entity that is running this facility.
Right.
And in fact, at one point, not Juliet, but another character does find the tunnels down underneath the original silo.
Billings, I think, was it? Sheriff Billings, the guy who takes over.
And he ends up being confronted by the AI.
Yeah.
And the AI warns him that if he tells anybody, that the AI will basically destroy their entire society.
Well, I know something about this, like, because of the books. And I don't really want to spoil it for you, so I'm not going to. But there is sort of another entity type out there who is guiding everything. Okay. Now, whether it's AI or not, I'm not going to divulge, but it is some greater thing watching over all the silos. You come to find out in season 2, there's 50 silos. So
actually 51.
Yes. The silo number 1 is the one that's the most important. Right. But yeah, so basically she makes it over there, and Solo's this kind of crazy wacky guy, played brilliantly by Steve Zahn. And you come to find out there's actually more people who actually survived in the silo. But Juliet realizes that she's got to get back to her silo because, rebellions is happening, and she wants to, either be there to help or, make sure it doesn't happen or something.
And also, if the rebellion goes too far, that indeed they could all be killed, just like what happened to this society in the new place that she's going to.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of backstory about what sort of happened in the apocalyptic world. Again, some spoilers here, just so that you know it. We see at the end of season 2 a guy, an architect, Donald King, and he has been hired to build a series of silos because of the predicted end of the world.
Right.
Now, the eventual impetus for building those is because there is nanotechnology in the world. And this nanotechnology being used as a weapon, will be used as a weapon. Hasn't quite gotten to that point, but kind of like a little bit like the remake of Day the Earth Stood Still, where these nanobots in swarms can just destroy everything in their path. That's what they're worried about, and so he is commissioned to build these silos. But there is a conspiracy. There is a crazy politician who preemptively wants to get ahead of the nanotechnology apocalypse. And his solution, let's create a nuclear apocalypse, which to me is kind of counterintuitive, but it's crazy thinking.
Yes.
They'll explore that, the later books, Shift and Dust, in season 3 and hopefully additional seasons. I believe I've heard, though, that they've only got another 2 seasons.
Right, I think they're going to wrap it up in
season 4. Yeah.
So season 3 is definitely going to be Shift.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back take a look back at how it all kind of came about, and then you'll find out what exactly happens and who's in Silo 1 and all of this kind of stuff. So yeah.
It's very thought-provoking as sort of post-apocalyptic stories goes. This is one of the real better ones.
Yeah, it's really good, and I highly recommend the books as well. Of course, we have seen this kind of thing before where people go underground, if there's some kind of horrible thing that happens on the earth. I mean, all the way from...
Last time I visited your house, that we did that. Anyway.
What am I thinking of? What's the... oh my gosh, why am I blanking? The movie...
Well, right now we're watching Paradise.
Yeah, well, there's Paradise.
Which is
we'll get
kind
into
of
that.
sort of a similar scenario, too, where people are squirreled away inside of a mountain after the so-called apocalypse.
Yeah. Logan's Run is what I'm thinking of. Logan's
Run
Run was really one of the, in my opinion, one of the first ones that sort of delved into the, society, not outside kind of thing.
Which, by the way, seemed like such a great movie at the time, but I watched it pretty recently, and it's not wearing its age too well, I have to say.
It's still, so much fun.
I mean,
I hope they don't remake it, though, because it's just such a cult classic, in my opinion. Peter Ustinov.
Yeah, but on the other hand, like when they redid the Schwarzenegger Paul Verhoeven film,
Total
Recall, I did like the remake.
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. It was more serious and not so tongue-in-cheek. Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. Some things are best left to our rose-tinted nostalgic
But they'll
glasses.
probably remake them.
Anyway, to conclude, I've enjoyed the 2 seasons of Silo.
Me too.
I think Graham Yost is a great showrunner. They've got a fantastic cast.
Yeah.
And in general, I want to thank Apple TV, who've been big proponents of big budget, well thought out sci-fi. We love Foundation,
which we'll talk about here as well.
I mean, Severance, of course. We've been ranting and raving about that. So Apple TV has been good friends to us genre fans, and they've Graham and his company have done a smart job with Hughes Works. And I know we're all eagerly anticipating season 3. Do we have a release date on that
I don't think so. Not quite yet. No.
Yeah, I think they're in pre-production on it right now.
Right. I think they're going to go straight back to back. Or no, I think they're going to do 3 and 4 back to back. I think that's what I read. Yeah. So.
But as we find out more news about it, you'll be the first to hear it from Kit and me, hopefully as well, in future episodes. Anyway, so if you haven't seen it, for God's sakes, go on Apple TV and watch seasons 1 and 2.
And then just go into the rabbit hole of Apple TV. So, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to Creation Looks Back. I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed partner, Mr. Gary Berman.
Oh, well, thank you. Good to be here. I have a good topic for us to talk about.
Yeah, go.
So, would you say we had a mixed relationship with Gene and Majel Roddenberry?
It was a complex one.
That's what I know.
There are some real stories there.
I know.
Rattling around in the attic.
I know, but now's the time.
Yeah, I guess
when people pass on,
yeah,
it's good to remember them in a somewhat truthful way.
Yeah.
But you should focus on the positives, but there were definitely some negatives, almost with anybody. But you were a much better person at that age that could go into these situations with celebrities. I was always like too shy and stuff.
Well, I don't think of you as a shy person, but for whatever reasons, I was very fortunate to develop a personal relationship with Gene Roddenberry. And it kind of happened obliquely through Richard Arnold,
right?
Who was a fan, who was attending our shows. He was one of Gene Roddenberry's assistants.
The main one, I think. Susan.
Yeah, him and Susan Sackett sort of were a tag team and worked for Gene around the time that The Next Generation was being developed. So around 1984, 1985, Gene was ensconced in the Hart Building on the Paramount lot.
Yeah, I remember going.
And Richard was working there for them. And oh my God, I mean, we got the invitations to come and visit him on the Paramount lot in the Hart Building where Gene worked.
Right.
I mean, it was a dream come true for a couple of New York guys that venerated the business.
Yeah, I do remember being up there.
And it's so funny because the Paramount lot is beautiful, but the Hart Building was really pretty shitty.
Did they rename that the Roddenberry building?
I think they renamed it the Roddenberry Building, and they rebuilt it because it was falling apart.
Yeah.
Anyway, through Richard, I got to meet Gene, and invited Gene to come down to a Star Trek show that we were doing in LA. I think it's 1985, if memory serves me correct.
That
Right
would
around.
only been 6 years before the event in Detroit, though.
Yeah, I mean,
no longer than that.
No, it was just around the time the Next Generation was coming out. Next Gen was 87, but I think we first were meeting him before it actually was released. Because I remember that.
Oh yeah, we had him before.
Because I remember Majel brought Marina to a show that we did at the Ambassador Hotel on the airing of like the third episode with Eric Menyuk as the Traveler.
Well, Majel brought Marina to a show in Philadelphia, I think before it even started airing.
I don't remember that. I
No,
remember her bringing Marina. I thought it was Marina's coming out at the Ambassador Hotel. I thought that was her first appearance for us, but you could well be
I
right.
don't know. Well, we had our first appearance wherever it was.
Anyway, so Gene was very paternal to us. He saw that we were, we genuinely cared about Star Trek. We were very, we were, I wouldn't say we were fanatics, but we really loved the show. And he saw that we, the kind of bespoke boutique way in which we run fan experiences.
What's best for his property?
I think it's best for almost any property. I mean, there's something to be said for the Comic-Cons that are out there, but our creation formula, it really likes to focus on our property, get in with all the creatives that are associated with the property, and really give the fans an inside look. And I think Gene appreciated our take on that. So he started appearing at our shows. And Gene then sort of went on to appear every year in Los Angeles at our show. He would do the valedictorian speech at the end of the convention.
Yeah.
So I think it was 1986, and he did his speech in which he introduced the members of the Next Generation cast.
Yeah, I know.
And then after the speech was over and Gene left the room, he had left his speech on the podium. So I saw it, I grabbed it, and had it framed, and we still have that speech.
We do.
From
And
1980.
collectively.
And it's funny because he misspelled some of the names of some of the cast,
he did.
and
Yeah. So what was starting to happen there when his health was failing? Was that when Majel kind of became more of the spokesperson?
well, that's a little bit later. Gene, went on. They released Next Generation, and God bless him. I mean, he had a great talent for putting a cast together, and for storytelling, but maybe not the best strengths in some aspects of scripting and storytelling. And then also some of his ideas, when you look back at the first season of Next Generation, I don't think they were that good.
No.
I think that fan opinion
Disappointing.
is of that. But he knew how to surround himself with amazing creatives. So over the course of time, of course, Next Gen got a lot better. But Gene still, hung in there, and he also had the experience of getting the Star Trek movies going, and that was on a separate path that was exciting too. But yes, his wife Majel became sort of a side spokesperson with him.
Yeah.
Would appear with him at his speeches, and would then actually do appearances and speeches of her own. You might recall in those days also that she had a merchandising business.
Yeah.
Lincoln Enterprises,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Renelda Stupian.
Yeah. I think she came to our show a couple of years ago to say hello.
Oh yeah, I mean, Majel would have a merchandise. Majel was a multi-billionaire. They had a beautiful home. They had Clark Gable's home in Bel Air, but that didn't stop her from selling like $2, bumper stickers.
It was cute. It
was fantastic. Anyway, Gene, rumor has it, I can't attest to the veracity of those rumors, though, that Gene may have engaged in some lifestyle practices that were not healthy to his body.
Okay, yeah, probably. Well, I mean, that stuff is all known. There are biographies written.
Yeah, I don't really want to cast
No,
dispersions
you don't
on the guy, but his health started to fail, and we started hearing about it around '89, and then 1990, and then we heard that he was in a wheelchair.
Right.
And then it came the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, and we wanted to do that show at the Shrine.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, how did that whole Shrine thing come about? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think what happened was we had the Hilton, right? What's the one on Century Boulevard?
Yeah, we were in the Airport Hilton.
The Airport Hilton.
That's actually where Gene appeared on several of our shows there in the late '80s.
But this one was going to be much bigger.
Yeah.
Well, the whole cast was reuniting with him, so that was too small.
Yeah.
And the Shrine, I think, had 6,000 seats, so we did switch on Sunday. So the whole convention, including all the dealers, had to move on Saturday night. And they did, and we opened on Sunday.
Right, so actually the show was at the Hilton.
Friday and Saturday.
And then for the actual full cast, because we were going to get the whole cast together, we moved it all over to the Shrine for Sunday, which is a crazy thing. Now, Gary, remember something very traumatic happened regarding that Shrine show. Do you remember what I'm talking about? The letter?
Oh, yeah, we got like death threats.
We got a letter.
Yeah.
The letters were cobbled together like a kidnapping note.
Yeah, I do remember.
And it said, if you bring that Jew Shatner to the Shrine, we will blow it up.
Yeah, of course I remember that. And then we had to call the FBI. It was like a nightmare. And then we hired Gavin DeBecker, security, which great. And
the police of the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was very scary, but and then we had to do the metal detector.
So we set up the metal detectors at the door, which caused horrible delays, like a 3-hour delay.
Like a key would set it off.
And everybody they were furious. People were furious.
They were cheering and clapping for Gene. I mean,
they were pretty upset.
All right, but once it started.
Of course. So, since we're talking about it anyway, a couple of funny moments in that actual Shrine performance. I think the moment that was the funniest to me was when Shatner came out and started talking. And I guess they each had a block of time, and Shatner went over. Bill went over. So running out of the sides of the rafters of the stage was DeForest Kelley with a hook to pull Shatner off, which was really, really funny.
Yeah, he was. There's more to this. I think we're out of time for today, but there were some interesting things that happened at the show in terms of maybe the finale, and Grace Lee Whitney was there. We haven't talked about
Well,
her.
why don't we talk about the moment that Gene came out, which surprised the audience because he came out on a wheelchair.
Yeah, let's close with
and
that.
then subsequent to that, okay? And we'll take that up next time.
Yeah, so we'll start with that next time?
Yeah.
You got it.
All right, hey man, that's fun.
Thanks,
bro.
Yeah, thank you.
It feels strange to do this thing after 25 years. It's but it's cluttered strange because you remember so many things. You remember so many crises and so on. And it's also strange to have it sort of working happily. Or at least I don't recall any fistfights and so on yet. Paramount, it's been kind of fun to do this for Paramount too, because they've done not a perfect job with the show, but they've done a pretty good job. We're going to have to talk to them about a few things they keep trying to do, but it's nice.
What does it feel like being here at this convention with all these people here that pay to come see you?
Well, it's gone from the first was there were they said we're going to have a couple hundred people at this affair, and that was an exciting thing. Imagine a television show attracting a couple hundred people, and but they just kept attracting more and more and more. The day I remember, we had gone to West Virginia, and they had a Coliseum, and they had 25,000 people. And that was almost too much of a good thing.
What's it like being here with all the people at one time, all the original cast members today?
Yeah, that's a kick. I saw them all last week too, and it's a miracle for any show to come back. Of course, no shows come back like ours has, and then to come back and have the cast there too, the old and the new. It's and have them not fighting.
My God, Stephen Moffat, what a guy, right? Whew, that was amazing.
You know, there's nothing cooler though than Adam and Gary talking about their memories of Majel and Gene Roddenberry.
I know, it's true.
In fact, when we're done recording this, I'm going to go listen to it again.
Good idea. So we've got some good stuff coming up.
Well, in the month of April, we have 2 supernatural conventions, which is amazing. We have one in Boston, one in Minneapolis. Can't wait for those.
Yeah, it's the road so far, the road ahead conventions. The first one's in Boston, April 11th through the 13th. It's almost completely sold out. It's going to be a great show. Jensen Ackles, Jared Padalecki, Misha Collins are our headliners. It's always such a fun time. And then in Minneapolis, it's April 25th through 27th. So if you're around in any of those areas and want to come have an amazing time watching some great supernatural stars talk about their experiences, definitely join us.
So where can you find more information and get tickets? At creationent.com. That's creationent.com. Please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications, and if you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.